Okay. We're good. It's like, why are there so many? Well, it sounds like,
I don't know if it's already. That was like.
You're breaking up.
No, just like. Yeah, we're not gonna.
Road. So yeah, everybody's fine then, but there's.
Does that work?
Where you spend?
This is all. Nothing.
Well, we might have plenty of lots.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Silva Board of Commissioners. I would like to call this meeting to order and then also to ask for a motion to approve our agenda. We have an amendment, I believe.
I'd like to make the motion to add so with attorney pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3.
Thank you. So we will add a closed session at the end for our adjournment. Do I hear any discussion on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your hands. Aye. Thank you. So now we will approve the amended agenda. Like a motion to do that.
I'll make that motion.
All right. We have a motion to approve the amended agenda. Is there any discussion? No, then I will ask for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
None opposed. Next on our agenda is approval of the consent agenda. That was in your packet. So do we also have a motion to approve our consent agenda?
I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Any discussion? And all those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Thank you. Now is a time for public comment, and this is comment on anything that is not on today's agenda. So I believe that we have one person here, George Neslin, who would like to make public comment. And if you will state your name, we don't have a mic or podium in here, so.
I'm Jordan Edlin, I'm a business here in Silva. I just wanted to come today and speak, an issue that's been concerning me for a long time is, some of the panhandling and begging that's going on at the intersections in town. The one at the bottom of the hill that is, kind of the entrance to Silva, particularly bothers me because that's also an area that the Rotary Club volunteers to beautify. And the group of people that I've seen there, it's the same group of people. They seem to be taking shifts doing it, and they're treating it much more like a business than somebody that's in true need of some kind of help. And I've spoken to plenty of town officials and some law enforcement. The biggest issue that I've been told is that there is no ordinance written. And so I just wanted to voice my concern and ask the board to write that ordinance in some way to deal with this issue that I feel is only going to get worse. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. We'll take that into consideration. Next on our agenda are the reports of our committees and commissioners. I would like to report that I had the privilege this week to meet and talk with the Secretary of State, Elaine Marshall. She was here touring small businesses, and I think it was really good to see people from Raleigh coming here to see our great little towns. So I appreciate that she was here. Another thing that I did, the North Carolina Home Consortium met last Friday, and we had 10 applications for money that was about $750,000 in an account that is set aside specifically for this. Out of those 10 applications, we did approve 5 of them, wholly funded or not. The biggest amount that was done was $250,000. $250,000. That in no way will finish a project or anything, but it gives people that might be trying to build housing and things like that, if they're just a little short of what they need for their projects, it will let them finish them. And that's something we really need here is the housing. That's all I have to report. Mary.
I just want to echo George. Like, that was my comment tonight. I work in a small business near the intersection that you're referring to, and we're having patients stressed out coming into our establishment because it's gotten out of hand. So we do intend to have this on the agenda very soon.
Yeah, nothing.
Greg.
Just want to thank Jake real quick and Paige and all staff for ordering the state equipment. It looks like we came in just under budget, and that should last for quite a while. So I want to thank you for all your hard work on that. And it looks like we'll be skating in October. Is that correct?
Ish.
So that's going really well, and I'm very pleased. Thank you.
Natalie.
I have nothing to report today.
Thank you. The manager's report.
Good evening. I just have a few things. So on Allen Street, we had a meeting with Civil Design Concepts, Worcester Engineering, Quassa, and Jackson Paper to review the draft plan set for Allen Street. So the plans are almost finalized and the contract is being drafted. The timeline is to have the board approve this contract September the 22nd for the construction contract, and then to have the work begin in early October. The goal is October 1st. So I'll have information coming on that for you all soon. I attended the Western North Carolina City County Managers Association meeting the 19th and heard an informative legislative update from the League of Municipalities and the Association of County Commissioners. There was also a health forum that the Southwestern Commission hosted about funding opportunities related to chronic health, behavioral health, and opioid settlement. It was more relevant to counties, but the information was very helpful and informative. As far as an employment update, Sergeant Jordan Beck has accepted a position with the Sheriff's Department as a school resource officer. So unfortunately, he's leaving us and going to the Sheriff's Department for it's a better scheduled job. So we wish him well and we'll miss having him with the town. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Next, Public Works.
Evening, everybody. I'm currently working on an RFQ to select a firm to manage the bid package, permitting and project management for the Bridge Park Green infrastructure improvements. New cost estimations are in on that. We're looking at upwards of $700,000 adjusted since 2019. That will include fees for permitting, project management, and bid oversight as well. Our construction will begin repairs on the Allen Street Bridge this coming week. These repairs were identified through the biannual inspection process that is facilitated by the NCDOT. Nothing to get too concerned about, just some preemptive measures there. We haven't lost any load rating on that bridge, and this should get us through the next 10 years or so without any more major repairs. The bridge will remain open, traffic will be affected. iWave UV filters have been installed now in all town-owned buildings, so you guys are breathing UV fresh air, if it feels any different. You've probably noticed that the sailboat's gone. Scratched out a place for the skateboarding ramps. All that stuff is in progress. Greg updated everybody there, but I'm happy with that progress as well. Next week, I'll complete and submit the annual solid waste report to the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. This last year, the Public Works Sanitation Department collected 777 tons of municipal solid waste. That's actually down about 50 tons from last year, which is good. We collected 46 tons of recycling, which is up. Trash consumption is down, recycling's up. I think we can agree, good trends. And I'll be on October 14th, a School of Government course teaching practical analytical methods. If no questions, that's my report.
700K. What was it? What? That the Bridge Park project?
Around 750,000. We don't have an itemized estimation yet, but
And that was up from the 400 and something. Because there was originally also an 800 something. Weren't there like 2 or 3 options in the original
That was,
watershed assessment? plan?
that one was from Mountain True when they were talking about it.
that also included Scotts Creek Stream Bank remediation, which would be phase 2 of this project.
So does that jumping from 400 something to 700K change our process moving forward? Because, I mean, we were looking for grants, but also considering the ARP funds for that. But I guess we just keep going forward and hope we can get some matching grants along the way.
I think it makes looking for grants more important.
So then what's the next step now that we have that updated price?
There's quite a bit of stormwater money around right now. I'm currently collaborating with Southwestern Commission to try to get some of that money. It's more infrastructure based, so it's probable that we could only fund segments of the project with that. And it would also could be used for other projects in town, so we need to prioritize our stormwater plan for the next several years. Mountain True is still interested in helping as well, and there's all kinds of. There is grant money available right now.
So we'll still put out the RFQ then.
We have to.
Any other questions? Good. Then we'll move to the police department report.
I'm going to be pretty brief today, but expect a longer report for the next week. I'm working on stuff for it. So let's start with we're we're fully staffed at this very moment, which is really, really good. We've got one leaving for an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday schedule. Can't complain for that. But we've also got a couple applicants that actually are already in the wing that are asking to work here. So it should go really quickly as far as replacing that spot. This being fully staffed has allowed us to move forward on some things that we've not been able to move forward in the past. So it feels good to be making progress in a lot of areas. We've been very busy with school starting, of course, the high school and then also the university. So we've been focusing on crosswalk safety. You guys may have seen moving the sign around some and doing some proactive stuff with that, and then also speed enforcement. The Walk for Hope has been scheduled. It's October 1st, Saturday. It'll be from 10 to 12. We are going to actually have the actual walk this year, which feels good. And it's going to be a little more ramped up than years past. So we're excited about it. I got a lot of fun things coming with that. Gotten lots of questions here in the last week or two about the social district. We're only a few months in, so it's kind of early to tell. We don't really have any noticeable difference in police calls at all. About the 6-month mark, we'll pull stats. I think we need to wait at least till then to get a really good look at, what difference it's made. But we don't have a noticeable difference at this point. I did an interview this week with the United States Department of Justice. They're going to be doing a publication focusing on several initiatives by Silva Police Department. We'll go to national publication. So really good to get that attention. And we have had, I appreciate your comments tonight. And we've all noticed we have had a pretty significant increase in calls for service that are related to our homeless population. And love to have a conversation with you. I can tell you a lot of things that you'd probably like to hear, I imagine, or anybody that's interested in that we've been working on. But we've been in regular contact with HERE and some of our other community resources almost daily. I've talked to HERE twice today. So we're definitely working on solutions for that. Not the easiest problem to solve. but we're definitely working on that, and we're seeing a real increase just in just the last month or two even. So it's definitely noticeable. So that's all I've got for today, unless anyone has any questions.
Any questions? Thank you. Next is the fire department report. Mike?
I'm gonna be like him, I'll be briefer anyway. I just want to tell y'all, we've had 766 calls since January 1st. That's from last year. Last year, the whole year, we only had 762, so we've already passed. And we've been running the paid staff for a month now. It's been working pretty well. We've had no problem. So that's all I can say. Okay.
Any questions, Archie? Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Planning board report.
You know how to planning board report.
And Main Street.
Good evening. I attended the Main Street Directors Conference in Elizabeth City a few weeks ago, and there was a heavy focus on the national accreditation standards that have changed this time, with an emphasis on building rehabilitation projects, which is good because I've been spending quite a bit of time working with property owners on some building rehabilitation. The farmhouse was just awarded a grant to look at their upper floor area for residential through Mountain BizWorks, which is a similar program that was the McPherson's building with the Carolina Hotel received for technical assistance for looking at their Opportunity Appalachia program as well. So that one is currently underway. And then working with the owners of the Sassafras building, that's going to be a longer term project. We applied for the state architecture's grant or architecture assistance at UNCG to get some help with renderings on some of the things that would be changed and bringing it up to code. And they're working on finding an architect as well. Following that, we'll look at the historic tax credit program to do the build out for it. We also received a grant from Mountain BizWorks to fund our first ever merchant meetup. That'll be on September 12th. We're going to have a lot of resources for those business owners to either grow their business, staff their business, or possibly even purchase their building. And then we also received a grant from Locable to help redo our website so that the events calendar can be more easily integrated with some of our partners like the Chamber of Commerce. And we'll have a searchable database for our merchants in Silva as well. Does anyone have any questions?
Do you have any knowledge about the festival that's happening Labor Day weekend? The Jam Festival?
A little bit.
Can you speak to that?
Sure. It's going to be on the Jam property completely. It's the 4M, it's music, mushrooms, different things like that. They're going to have a kind of a skate demo as well at the Methodist Church. But most of it's going to be contained to that property. And it'll be basically what you normally see are booths down there, except they'll have different types of folks who are dealing with, different types of mushrooms, harvesting them, preparing them, that sort of thing.
I'll just give you a little update on the Opportunity Appalachia. Thank you, Vern, so much for looking into all these things for us. So just a thank you to Opportunity Appalachia for bringing this kind of assistance to North Carolina. They're mostly in Kentucky and Ohio. So this is their first year here, but so we put out a request for quotes, and we have selected Alliance Architecture, a firm out of Durham, and we're very excited about talking to those possibilities of our building downtown. So it's not big.
Plus a board report.
Not a whole lot related specifically just to Silva. Lots to update on, but speaking of just Silva, we rejected all the bids on the wastewater treatment plant number 2 upgrades. I think we're starting to see sort of the same thing we saw in the Bridgeport project is a double in price from what we expected. So we have to go back, and this is the plant on Scotts Creek. So we have to go back and ask for more funding and try to find some cost cutting to make that project doable. We have the ability to do that because of the Jackson Paper lift station that can flow to either sewer plant if you're interested. That's really the only update for Tuasa.
How is the lift station going?
It's
Looks like-
still on budget, but there's been a little bit of delay, I think, getting some part, I think maybe a month delay on it. So overall, very well.
I noticed the lids, the residential lids, seems like there's a little silver disc there now. Is it some kind of electronic monitor?
Slowly in the process of switching the meters to remote read. So that previously the meter reader had to drive, go to each water meter, open it, record the number. There's a wireless transmitter in them now. So now they just drive the route. But they're very expensive to replace. And Tuasa replaces them at Tuasa's cost, not the customer's cost. So we do it as we, get the funds. So yeah, you might see your meter box get an antenna placed on.
You have a question? Pinnacle Park, can you give us a report here?
Yes, we have firmed up our timeline of what we're going to be working on for the next year or two. We are currently we're about to issue an RFP for a master plan for Pinnacle Park. October, November timeframe, hopefully October. And have a contract on that around January. We're planning on applying for the TCPF grant from PDA to pay for that master plan, but we might be asking for some Fisher Creek watershed funds for that as well. But what we're doing with that master plan is as part of that master plan, whoever gets that is going to prepare the part-if application for us. 2024 part-if application. So that would be to rehab the trails in Pinnacle Park and implement whatever else comes out of the master plan based on the needs survey that will also be done next couple of months.
Any questions? Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for the reports. We're moving along, I think, Silva. Next on our agenda is the public hearing on the ordinance amendment, section 5.4, parentheses JJ, of the town of Silva zoning and subdivision ordinance, and it's the section that pertains to short-term rental. And I have a list of people that have signed up, and I would like to ask that anybody not put a check that they want to speak, that has decided they want to speak. Then I will go down the list as you entered here. And I just want you to know for a public hearing, you have 3 minutes to state your cause or whatever you want to tell us about this. And please do state your name. And I ask that everybody have their phones silent since we don't have a mic for people so that we can hear them. If you're with a group, if you would pick someone to be the person to speak for you so we don't, for time constraint. If you can't finish in 3 minutes, then if you have somebody with you, if they would like to continue your conversation or whatever, but try not to duplicate what others say. That makes sense. And I will start with Sarah Shelton.
My wife is gonna read for me.
Okay.
Since I moved to Silva in June of 2020, I have watched the search results on Airbnb grow from 2 pages of results to a whopping 759 houses. Over the course of my time living here, I watched members of my community fight to maintain and find housing, not just my friends who make a wide range of incomes, but the community centers I've worked for, where people on disability are in the constant freak of homelessness. A few months ago, I watched a trailer get listed on Airbnb at $125 a night. Growing up in poverty, trailers were all my single mom could afford. Now, they are only for the upper middle class and above. If we can't have trailers, what can low-income people have? This is not an issue specific to Silva. Across the United States, towns are fighting to regulate the monster of short-term rentals that are without a doubt backed by data, and any conversation you have with any given locals that's not profiting off Airbnbs, destroying, upending, and inflating the housing prices in this country. On my tiny street in town, the entrance of my neighborhood is lined with Airbnbs. Every house that goes up for sale on my street is doomed to become the next Airbnb, overpriced to discourage families and encourage the deep pockets of short-term investors who are willing and able to overpay for housing. Eventually, we will see our neighborhoods become littered with half-vacant housing that hosts vagrant passerbys whose investment in our community is unmatched to those who live here full-time. As the number of Airbnbs grow in our community, the more and more vacant they become, still making double the amount they could with rent. Airbnb owners don't see this as an issue because their income is coming before the needs of our community. People who have lived in these mountains for generations cannot afford to stay here or own land here. People who have been here for 5 to 10 years, who are functional members of our community, our healthcare workers, our baristas, the people who are truly spending money in our economy are being forced to live or crammed in less than sufficient housing. This is unsustainable, and the only people here today fighting these regulations will say they're doing so in the name of freedom while they imprison our communities. I believe it is greed that lies at the heart of short-term rentals and all landlordship. Housing is a human right, not an investment opportunity. Short-term rentals have been and will continue to threaten our way of life and community. And if this is not resolved today, the fight will never end to regulate standalone Airbnbs. Just as town as big as Atlanta and as little as Silva fight the injustice of housing greed, the fight will continue across the United States and here in our small towns and put a stop to this. If you have enough money to buy 2, 3, 4, 5, or even 6 houses, you can build an ADU in your backyard to supplement your income with Airbnb. And the idea of having vagrant Airbnb, if the idea of having vagrant Airbnbers in your backyard makes you uncomfortable, then it's time to come face to face with what you're doing to the neighborhoods in our community. To the commissioners, I believe it is your responsibility.
Thank you very much. Next on the list, I have Diane Brazier, a question mark, where Diane? Do you don't want to speak? Next is Garrett Craig.
Hi, I'm Garrett Craig. I'm a resident of Silva. I'm going to continue reading the end of Sarah's real quick. To the commissioners, I believe it is your responsibility, despite the fears of backlash from those with wealth, to do what is right for every citizen of this town and vote in favor of these regulations. And with that, I do not believe 759 short-term rentals should be exempt from this ordinance. Housing should be returned to accessible housing upon the passing of this ordinance, or else the housing crisis cannot be resolved, only somewhat cauterized. I'd just like to add a little bit to that on my own. Obviously, everyone knows it's tough enough to afford housing in 2022, no matter where you live, but Jackson County and Silva are even particularly special cases. As far as Jackson County goes, the median home sale price was up 40% year over year in March 2022. It's actually 50% higher growth than nationwide. And it's clear that short-term rentals are a big part of that increase. It's obviously a beautiful place to come visit. I can understand why a lot of tourists are looking for Airbnbs here, but there's a better way. Short-term rentals are clearly pushing locals out. I know personally a family who was long-term renting, and they were going to have the house they were living sold to a person who was fully intending on using it as a short-term rental. When this board began discussing regulations to Airbnb back when we redid the ordinances beginning of the year, that sale actually fell through and they had the opportunity to buy that home that they were living in. And I think that's miraculous and just one example of something that could happen en masse all over town. If we are able to push back against this industry. I know the house that I bought last year was in a similar situation where it could have been sold to a person who made a similar offer to us, who was fully intending to use it for short-term rentals. So those are just narrow misses in a sea of successes for Airbnb. In North Carolina, as a whole, new hosts in 2021, just new hosts, earned $75 million in profit. In rural North Carolina, stays have doubled since 2019, reaching 1.5 million nights booked in 2021. So I believe that, like other municipalities all across the country, we can fight back with common sense. And Jackson County residents, Silva residents who want to open Airbnb or have a spare room or a mother-in-law suite they're no longer using, that's the best of the world. We can bring people in and show this place and show people how beautiful this place is without robbing residents of the home.
Thank you very much. Next is Ann Garrett.
I'm Mary Garrett. I'm a homeowner here in Silva. I own multiple homes. We have multiple rentals. I want to have the freedom to continue to run my businesses. And that's exactly what they are. They're not my only businesses because if I used my rental business to support my family, I would starve to death. It is not about greed. I make small amounts of money. What I gain over time is the ability to have homes that are paid off so that during my retirement years, I do have income. My husband and I, as I said, own multiple homes. We do not Airbnb at this time. However, I intend to Airbnb some of my homes. And we are against this portion of the ordinance, talking about short-term rentals, number 8 in particular. They're only allowed accessory use, primary use of a main structure in owner-occupied or long-term rental. I understand the housing crisis. However, it's not out of greed or anything for me. It is about income and supplementing income. we can barely afford to pay our bills, but the cost of increasing groceries, we can barely afford to buy good food. So it is not, it is me personally as a business owner trying to continue to grow my business. And so we are against particularly in the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on my list is Dickie Woodard.
Yeah, I'm Dickie Woodard, and I just have to say, after listening to everybody speak, I mean, I'm trying to see the world through others' eyes, but when it comes to private property rights, once you start taking that away from someone, it's a slippery slope. And I won't get into all the muddy water that is created so far as who makes what or where greed may figure in or anything else. But I'll just say this, there's so many individual rights that I look and I see that we're having to give up because of groupthink or others may feel a different way. But I think of a shirt I saw one time that said Alaska, land of the individual and other endangered species. I'd like for all of us just to think more like individuals. Do what you got to do, but private property rights, don't go down that slope. Be my recommendation. And I don't know who would enforce it, Eric. I mean, who carries that ball? I mean, if someone chooses to rent their property or go against whatever it is you put wording wise, who enforces it? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anna Samms.
Y'all don't hate me. Affordable housing, everybody knows there's a lot of realtors here tonight, and everybody would like to be able to help those people, 150,000. However, as far as taking property rights from people, and then all of a sudden they can't pay their mortgage, and then they're upside down on a house. That's that slippery slope that Vicky was talking about. Prices are starting to go down in the market. And there is no one to enforce it as far as what I've asked and got a response from. But, there's people that have come here. They've opened up a business. They've bought locally furniture. There is no problem. I have 2 vacation rentals above me, but I don't live in the city limits. I don't really maybe have a dog in this fight, but I do have clients that have property rights, and I'm asking y'all to consider that.
Thank you. Vicky.
Hi. I also may not have a dog in the fight because I don't live in the city limits, but we have an Airbnb and we have had it since 2007. And we just made it an Airbnb probably 2 years ago. And we've done pretty good. We're not pressed. We don't have to have it rented all the time. But I'll say in response to some of the greed questions, what were we going to do with it other than sell it? Well, it was almost paid for. We wanted it. So we said we had to pass it every day. We made it Airbnb. Those people that rent my Airbnb, I leave a goodie basket with all the pamphlets that I can get from the town, the restaurants, where to eat, where to go, what to do when it rains. I mean, fishing, you name it, it's in my goodie basket. So, and they use that. They thank me for it. And like I said, the prices of houses they went through the roof the last 2 years, not just in Silva. This is all through the country. They're coming down now. Maybe it'll change, but it's like a noise ordinance. You can't control your neighbor's dogs barking or their motorcycles or loud cars. They can't do that. We don't really have a noise ordinance, at least not where I live. And it's the same thing with the houses. How are you going to control that? What they're doing. I don't see it. And I think it's very unfair because like other people, we've worked hard, we're retired. I worked in DC. My husband was police in our town. So I just, yeah, we've invested a lot of money in the town and, you know, outfitting our place too. So anyway, I want you guys to take note that there are people that aren't in it for greed. That's just what we do. I mean, I don't know what else to do with it. So. Thank you.
I have no one else that listed to speak except Jennifer Hart.
Yes.
Question mark.
Yes, I'll go ahead. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm Jennifer Hart. A lot of you know me. I grew up here. A lot of you have had emails from me. I'm finally here in the flesh. And you'll probably be shocked about what I'm going to add to this. And you probably think I'm going to go one way, but what I'm actually going to say is that with Airbnb, those taxes or VRBO, whatever, that come in is a lot of taxes. So what I'm asking for is if there's some way that we can use those taxes to better the projects that we're trying to work in this town. Is there some way that we can use the tourism to better our town? So what I mean by that is what I'm worried, let me say that. What I'm worried about is the enforcement of it. This town has become a witch hunt of people going after each other. Everyone in here can talk about that. It has become a witch hunt of people going after each other about not doing this ordinance, not doing that ordinance. Some of you don't even know what the ordinance was and passed 300 a few months ago. So what I'm asking is this, instead of going down this really slippery slope of who are you, what do you have, how much tax are you, why don't we do it where we say the money that comes in, that we can somehow bring that back to our community and help the people that need affordable housing, that need the things that we're trying to do right here, skate parks. Why do we have to do one or the other? I do agree that there's a lot of houses here that are on Airbnb and VRBO. I understand that. I do calendars for 5 of them, okay? Again, there are too many of them. But my worry is that if you go from one extreme to the other, we're just causing a major witch hunt in this town that I'm not ready to see. That's already happened. So is there some way that we can curb it, but also can we use those tax? That's an attorney question. Can we use that tax money? The millions that are coming in just from Airbnb that are going into a random bank account, that's what they told me. I don't know if that's for sure. Can we use those taxes instead of for tourism? Can we use that for us here and to make the affordable housing that people can actually afford to live in? Is that a thing that we can look into?
Thank you very much. You came after this. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Just that, you know, a lot of people that mainly for the businesses downtown is that, you know, people are buying in this low density region. You know, some of them are using it for Airbnb. Many of them are using it for themselves. And they're adding Airbnb, not maybe to pay for their mortgage, but just to supplement when they're not here. But I truly think if you're going to go restrict someone from how they want to use their property that they've worked hard for and put all their money into maybe one basket, you know, not everybody can afford 2 or 3 houses. Most people in this town can't, you know, but it's going to affect these businesses downtown. They're buying them so they can walk and be responsible if they're actually drinking. If they're not, then they want to walk downtown and get exercise. But they want to be close to town for a reason, and that's to support these businesses. And I truly feel like if you start, yes, we have a housing issue. Yes, the market went crazy, but prices are coming down, and the person that's getting hurt most. And what a lot of us as realtors like to do is help that first time buyer. Well, there is no help for them right now. They're just gonna have to wait. But they still have to have a place to live. And yeah, you can restrict to year-round use or annual leases, but that's not, you know, that's also restricting again
what that person worked so hard to get in place. And maybe they started a business model, like Anna said, that, they budgeted and understand what it's going to take to pay that mortgage. And if you restrict their rights to do some of these things, then they are going to go upside down, So I would just think, tourism is, I worked at 553 years ago and Ross shut down because, well, maybe you can't have a real fine dining restaurant like that here and everybody come because they just use it for special occasions. But the only way for a lot of businesses in this town to make it is during the tourism months. And, as we expand, the town grows and we're getting more and more year-round business, but still it's 6 to 7 months these people make their money to run their businesses. And if you go restricting use of property, you're going to see businesses that I think that this town has worked hard to fill these buildings. I know Paige has been out there working, trying to fill these businesses, the empty buildings, and there's still a discussion about, developing downtown, some of the older buildings and making lofts and getting more housing that way. But still, it's not I just don't think it's fair to tell somebody what they can or can't do with their property. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, did I miss anyone? Did everyone get a chance to sign up on that? Then I will ask for a motion to close the public hearings.
Motion to close the public hearing.
All right. Have a motion. Is there any discussion? And all those in favor signify by saying aye and raising their hand. And we're going to move on to new business. Item number 1 is the ordinance amendment, section 5.4 JJ of the town of Silva zoning and subdivision ordinance. And that is the short-term rental. I will entertain information or discussion or whatever. I think the board can start on that.
Yes, I get just a overview of the rewrite why we're at this point. So we had our big ordinance rewrite last year and beginning of this year. And we contracted help with that, Withers and Ravenel, and they essentially, with planning board input and our input, wrote 600 pages of ordinance. And at the time that they wrote the regulations for the short-term rental, we decided that it was a lot to debate. We would look at the issue in the upcoming months and we would revisit it. And sort of what they wrote was not well tailored to our town, I don't think. They outright completely banned short-term rentals in one of our districts, so way more strict than what we're proposing to do. And then they left it completely, essentially unfettered in all the other districts. And I just don't think that is a very good model for the town of Silva. And what we were looking to do is to strike a balance with this ordinance, right? Have it a well-regulated use in all districts that are somewhat equally treated. And what at least I'm trying to balance, I'm not trying to balance out, the needs of investors and residents. What I'm trying to balance out is the needs of community members, residents who own property and have rentals and need to make supplemental income off of those rentals, and balance those with the needs of people who are trying to find a rental they can afford or trying to buy a home they can afford. And the compromise that we are proposing in this is to remove the outright ban on STRs in our low density district and allow them as an accessory use. So nobody is going to, you don't have to lose, we're not shutting down anybody's Airbnb. It just has to be allowed accessory use. Primary use of the structure, according to line 8 in here, the proposal is that it's primary use. So it can be an accessory dwelling unit, an accessory unit in an Airbnb. If it's in the main structure, you have to have, it has to be owner occupied or be a long-term rental in there as well. And the goal of that is you can still supplement your income with Airbnb But we're trying to alleviate the housing shortage and the high cost of rentals. And the high cost of homes, because, when someone's buying an investment property, we see this a lot from people even out of state. It's a lot easier you can pay a whole lot more for them. If, you spend a month in a house in Silva, if you can Airbnb it out the rest of the time. So it drives up our real estate prices. This way, you can still buy your home from out of town, but you need to have a long-term renter in there as well. Your accessory use can be an Airbnb, not the primary use. And so that brings us to the changes in the ordinance. And we looked at those at our last meeting to discuss. So, that's just sort of a background on what we're doing. So open for discussion then. If anyone else has input on that.
I think the biggest takeaway is that it wouldn't take away anyone's existing Airbnb, because those are exempt from the change in the ordinance that's proposed.
For how long? Changes hands.
Until they go to sell, right? And
How long for that changes hands? How long are they grandfathered in?
until it changes hands.
And grandfathered and grandfathered in. That's a
That's what folks who did invest in this, and that was their business plan. That's what they intended to do all along.
Can you speak into your mic a little bit?
No, I'm sorry. We think that this is a fair way to have people who did invest initially into being an Airbnb to keep that property that way, to be grandfathered in.
That's that owner occupied.
Sorry? Got to be owner occupied.
No, so if you look at line 8 is the requirement that makes it to where you can only have it as an accessory use. And then in 8A, if you're an existing short-term rental, you're exempt from that, right, that requirement. So
And that's
if
if you pay taxes.
right,
Are there examples of this actually working anywhere else? I know you had a consultant come in and work with you. In other markets where they've tried to do this, has it actually helped create more affordable housing? Is there not an alternative? This plan create more affordable housing? It seems like Haywood County is doing something completely different.
Yeah.
And it seems to me like you're wanting to bring down people's property values by calling it affordable housing. And those are the people that voted you guys in place. I don't live in town, so I'm not affected. I'm just looking at it from the outside. If the idea is to create affordable housing, it seems to me that you're attempting to bring people's property values down.
I had a lot of concerns about this short-term rental, and I just want to be transparent that I do, in fact, have 2 Airbnbs. One is on Airbnb, it's outside of the town limits, and it's connected to my primary business, which is a tourism-based rafting company. I'm very selective in who I choose in my Airbnbs. My Airbnb in town is in a low-density area. I don't have it listed on Airbnb. My primary purpose for it is not to rent it out. It's for my family. My family's in Michigan and here, and I'm seeing a lot of tourists, or part-time residents, I should say, that are in similar cases as me. So when I first saw this ordinance, I kind of got outraged. Like, what do you mean I can't have a place for my family to come to and supplement the income with renting it to tourists? Like, what do you mean by that? I got very outraged about it, and I've had to give this a lot of consideration and a lot of thought. In my conversations that have come from this, some people have come to me with the joy of the idea of turning their basement into an Airbnb that maybe were never thinking of doing that before, thinking, oh, wait a second, like I can do this in the town limits? I had no idea. So in some ways, this is promoting what some of the commissioners are talking about in terms of providing more housing. In some ways, it feels restrictive. It feels like it's taking away your property rights. You don't want to be told what to do. And I got very defensive about that. But when I'm trying to think about the bigger picture, I'm kind of wrapping my head around this, that it could help our housing market. One of my big concerns is the people maybe in the back row that have recently sold property, that have heard misinformation, that maybe somebody purchased a property wanting it to be a short-term rental. And then here we are saying, you can't do that. And if you have not gotten tourism income by August 25th, you're screwed. And And I don't like that. And so one of my notes that I'm hoping to present to you all is changing that. Like I spoke to several attorneys' offices. They're 60 days behind on average right now because we've had so many sales the last 6 months or year probably. So what I would like to propose is if we do go along with this measure, making 2 changes, one being that we go 60 days from the date of the work session of July 28th, which would give people a whole nother month to close out if that was their plan and that was their proposal and this was their business. Or go 60 days from today, which will let the dust settle and all your sales play out till October 23rd. I think that that's a happy medium of starting something where we care about the town limits and not letting it get out of control, but kind of reining it in a little bit so that we can have a town that has housing for our service industry.
But instead of attacking Airbnbs, why not pay more attention to the people that have raised their rents from $500 to $1,000? That's the biggest problem with not being able to find affordable housing.
So on the housing question, obviously there are a lot of ways you can tackle affordable housing, right? I mean, this is one approach of many. We've tried large developments that got voted down. I see some people in the audience here that came out and spoke against those large housing developments. So this is not the only approach that we want to take to address the affordable housing, but we're also limited in our ability to tell people what they can do, like mentioning the property rights, right? Like Silva is essentially, it's an intentional community. You live in a community with zoning regulations. We can tell you there are certain things we can tell you can and can't do. What you charge for rent is not one of those things. Obviously, you don't want the government coming and telling you you have to lower your rent $1,000. But we do have the ability to regulate uses in town, right? And that's part of living in a community is we get to balance the needs of our community members and determine what use regulation makes sense. And this is one of the things, this is one of the tools we have at our disposal to do that. I personally think vacant second homes, people who aren't renting it on Airbnb and are just spending a few weeks in Silva, I think that's a much larger impact on our rental issue and our affordable housing issue. But I can't come up with a good way to alleviate that problem, right? There's certain things we can and can't do. So multifaceted approach, and this is one of the ways that we can help manage our housing issue.
Raise our hand and we just speak out. How are we doing? My name's Ben Rickard. I live in town. I've got an Airbnb. I've got a long-term rental. Have you guys ever thought about, restricting short-term rentals to permanent residents of Jackson County? I believe that model potentially been adopted in some areas in Atlanta, suburbs of Atlanta. Any thoughts on that?
You mean somebody that would
So this would prevent, say individuals from, nothing, I'm from Florida originally, full transparency, been here for longer, excuse me.
I think if you're gonna have this back and forth between the board and the public, we need to reopen the public hearing.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll make the motion that we reopen the public hearing.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So to be legal, thank you. We are opening.
Were you through, Ben?
I wasn't if I didn't have to be.
Wait just a second. Just a second.
Aye.
We had to correct our not operating
This is my first
legally or
time.
whatever. So now you may continue.
Well, and the idea behind that, Greg, would be, to potentially prevent folks, from out of state, in extremely inflated markets who look at our extremely inflated market and it looks less expensive and they, purchase multiple properties and, keep local folks, again, I'm a fan of Airbnb. I have one in, I guess it'd be a medium density, it's out of the town limits. We have a long-term rental, but yeah, it would be a way to potentially, protect some folks who's this is their livelihood, and folks, with W-2 job. I have a W-2 job. I'm a physical therapist here in town, and some folks think that that's the only way to work. You go out and you get a W-2 job, you punch a clock for 40 hours a week. That's just not what some people want to do. Some folks like to invest and I quite frankly, I like it too. But I do think it needs to be regulated. I think it does great things for our local tourist economy. When I go visit an area, I want to stay downtown in a home. It provides affordable, short-term, stays. I don't want to go to the Hampton Inn or whatever, and pay $200 a night, to be stuck in a room with somebody else. Yeah. So I think there's a lot more to look at it. And, I think David has being in the downtown district, I believe with this ordinance, you would be protected because it's technically a part of that structure. It sounds like, Mary, that you have one too, that is a little unique, but yeah, I certainly think there's a lot to consider here, so.
Okay, wait just a second.
Back to my question, have you considered the thing that the Atlanta area has adopted?
I have considered it, but I don't know the legalities behind
Okay.
if that's something we can do.
So yeah, I looked into that. Yeah, Atlanta did it. It's legally questionable in North Carolina for sure. There are other issues with how you define an owner. An owner of an Airbnb is not necessarily a person. It can be an entity. And then also the issue we're trying to tackle is housing. And it doesn't really matter much if the house is owned by someone in Silva or Florida, the impact is the same. And so what we're trying to address is housing in this, where the person lives outside of that is somewhat irrelevant.
Would the impact really be the same though? Because you decrease the size of the buyer pool significantly if you just limited it to permanent residents of Jackson County.
Again,
I'm confident.
legally questionable.
Okay.
Excuse me, can I just throw in, we don't do back and forth,
Gotcha.
but questions and
Sure.
stuff that our board can ask you a question or whatever, but I would like to give others
Absolutely.
a chance, please. So.
Getting back to this gentleman's question with the so-called experts, the consultants. If you implement this, what did they advise in terms of enforcement? Who would enforce it? I've not heard anybody say.
We didn't have any consultants. We didn't hire any consultants. We contracted the county for enforcement of our ordinances.
Or there's no.
That was for the ordinance rewrite, the 160B. Yeah. What about them?
Well, did they have any clue as to if you do implement what they put on paper, who would enforce it?
We did implement what they put on paper. That's what we implemented in January.
Okay.
And the county is the one who enforces our ordinances.
Okay, so somebody's gonna go door to door.
Yeah.
Neighbor's gonna call on a neighbor.
I just want to know if it's gonna be enforced.
That's what I'm
Excuse me, let's listen to our lawyer.
Okay, so we contract with the county for initial law enforcement and legal enforcement of the ordinances. In the event that doesn't correct it, then we have to take legal action in the town. So the town would enforce the ordinance. We enforce all of our ordinances. Anyway.
Okay.
So, and there's a couple different reasons to decide affordable housing that's involved. There's also one of the arguments, and I'm just letting everyone know what the arguments, another argument in favor of this is that it preserves the integrity of the town. If you don't regulate them and you have a corporation or whoever come in and buy up all the housing because they can make a fortune in it, and you have no residents that live downtown, it quits being a real town and it becomes, I hate to single out another town to make it sound like I'm casting dispersions on it, becomes more of a Highlands. So Highlands they actually have enacted there's ongoing litigation and they've had that for a year. They've been involved in litigation. In their little town, which pretty much has the same footprint as the Silva, they have 270 short-term rentals within the municipal limits of the town of Highland. So they've lost, or if they ever had one, but they don't have a real town anymore. It's purely tourism driven. So if you try to retain somewhat of what everyone here knows as downtown Silva, if you open that up so that it's unbridled short-term rentals, downtown Silva with real residents probably will no longer exist. So this is in one way to preserve a real town with real businesses that is something other than purely tourist dollars. So from that side, from that standpoint, that is another factor that goes into regulating short-term rentals. Again, to correct some of the other statements that were previously made, there was a statement, something about there were 750 short-term rentals. In Silva, the municipal limits, according to Nick Breedlove, we think we have somewhere between 19 to 21 right now. That's how many we think we have existing. Those would be grandfathered in for as long as those people own those businesses. So if you invested in that being a short-term rental and you spent money on improving it or getting it or buying furniture for that purpose, you would not lose that under the current draft. As far as the occupants tax dollars, yeah, that's mandated by the state. We don't get to choose where the occupancy tax dollars go. Nick Breedlove has a huge pile of money that he is looking to spend, that he has to have allocated for certain things. So that may be something that the legislature will take another look at, because in the last 3 years, he apparently has so much money, he really doesn't know what to do with it. And he's looking for ways to spend it.
I have an idea.
And so that's something that we would like to, yes, use to invest in something other than just tourism and the
Restaurants and stores.
Convention and performing arts centers and tourism dollars. It's what you can spend those on. Hopefully that'll get opened up, because it is a substantial amount of money.
What opens that up?
The North Carolina legislature
Okay.
determines what can be done with that money, and it's actually very restrictive for North Carolina. It pretty much, you have to spend it to get more tourism. A lot of states are like that, and a lot of states are changing it. Louisiana changed it to where they can use it to address housing. And I'd like to see North Carolina change it, because it should, part of that occupancy tax should go back to helping alleviate some of the issues that rentals create. But unfortunately, in North Carolina, they make it pretty difficult. Nick is doing a good job of trying to open that with that grant process. In fact, Town of Silva will be applying for one of those, the PCPF grant, but he is very limited in what he can do with that.
And I would like to give the other commissioners a chance to speak, but I did want to remind you, Silva's city limits, the footprint is very small. People that live in Webster and other places, they may have a Silva address that their mail comes to, but they're not in the city limits. And we have a map back there if you have any questions about what actually is city limits of Silva. And this, we've had our zoning ordinances since 1997. They've been changed around, but this past couple of years, the state legislation made us change them to go with their rules, some of their rules. And that was called, the law is GS 160D. So that's what caused our major rewrite. And that's where we are to now. Now, most of it has already been approved. This is one section that we haven't approved. So if you'll bear with me, I would like for the commissioners to be able to speak. And if you're going to speak to them, remember you have 3 minutes in a conversation with them that we'll have to move on. Is that okay?
Mary, did you want to talk about number 8?
Yeah, I did. And then you want to close the public hearing then?
Are y'all ready? Not
Are y'all ready?
I have one last thing I want to offer. I don't know if it's before or after.
Yes, if you do it while the public hearing.
Things are complicated, as we all know about, a lot of things. But anyway, I'm a carpenter. I also own some property. We recently bought a house that we intended to rent, so full disclosure. But I also work for folks who in the town and outside of the town who have inherited property and intended to rent it, or as as you mentioned, Mary, about, doing something with it while their family uses it and friends use it, but then they have it sitting empty for this period of the year. And so, these are folks who've inherited it. Some of them are local. In fact, most of the two I'm thinking of are local, and have inherited the property and have hired me to fix it up and work on it. And, one of them will be affected by the ordinance because they don't live they no longer live in that house. It's their mother's, their mother passed away and they inherited the house. So they won't be a primary residence. So my understanding is if they live off site there, they won't be able to then short-term rent that. So they won't be able to then, I guess, recoup their investment. What I'm asking the town to think about is, are you limiting investment and growth in the housing market and basically improving houses in our town? There are a lot of derelict houses and a lot of improvements can be made. Will this ordinance then be a disincentive to then invest in the house and invest in Silva? It also could have that effect is what I'm suggesting, in that people then understand that, well, you can only then, if I was to buy this piece of property, then I can only short-term rent it and then the investment is less. It's going to take longer to return your investment. So is that hurting growth? Because as I mentioned earlier, things are complicated. Houses won't stay, it's a lot of work to Airbnb. And I think that people won't Airbnb them forever. They'll go back on the market once they're possibly they've been renovated and now the house is able to be sold to a family perhaps. So I think there's a cycle going on. I understand there is a housing crisis and we're trying to respond to that. And that's to be, y'all's work on that supposed to be applauded. You're responding to the times, but think also in the long term that we don't want to discourage investment in our town in general and bringing up and improving on the housing that we have. So it's something that I see in my work.
Thank you. Okay,
I'm sorry. Yeah,
that's okay.
Hi. So first, I apologize for my ignorance. This is my first town hall and I just became a realtor in February. Lord, spent half my life here in Silva, worked at Western and rented from the Robertsons downtown and then also rented from another family on Josephine Street. And I guess my question is, because I know that there are a lot of already restrictions, like Ridgeway, can't be a short-term rental, correct? Oh, sorry. So my question is, aren't there already a lot of restrictions on which areas already can't be short-term rentals versus not?
Not
versus low density versus high density.
It says every zoning area can have short-term rentals as specified in number 8 here.
Stephanie, you're right in the sense that when Withers Ravenel came through and did their ordinance on that February 10th meeting, we had concerns over chickens, beekeeping, and short-term rentals. Chickens took precedence and it seemed to dominate the entire evening. And it did go through that you couldn't do it in low density, but and I didn't catch that. I realized that a few months ago. And I think it's because a realtor was like, wait a second, you can't do them there anymore. And I looked at it and I was like, hey, am I not going by the law here? Like, can we not? It was a mistake. We're trying to rectify that, I believe.
It's because there's so many beautiful areas in the town of Silva that 100%, I'm all about balance, like preserve it, keep it locals. The goal for me and here is to live in downtown Silva, like permanent, but I don't think that you can just take something totally away, especially if someone purchased a property knowing that it could be a short-term rental, they're grandfathered in, and then all of a sudden their value has just drastically decreased. No offense, but it really, depending on where the market lies, it's just like any of us, like we're really going to look at all this land of what we really sell it for when we're trying to get a new Ingalls and or affordable housing. It's like, are we going to now start restricting? Oh, wait, we're not. And so I guess my question is instead of like, are we just throwing darts at one thing instead of truly looking at like the bigger scheme of what's occurring in Silva? Because we are very limited in our land versus Macon County where I grew up. You know, Macon, Haywood County has the beautiful pasture land. All I'm doing is selling in Murphy because that's where right now it's affordable for people who's trying to come into this area. And it's like, we just have to, it's like a balancing act that I do think that you just can't totally take something away. Silva and Bryson City are my ones that are so comfortable that there are absolutely no land. And when you can find land, you take it, people pay whatever they can just to hold on to it. And so I guess my question is don't totally take this.
We were not totally taking away the ability to have a short term. It's, in fact, we're easing it, and low density is completely not allowed right now.
But you are taking away if I bought a short-term rental and then I go to sell it to her and now she can't use it as short-term. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct. She can use it as short term rental as an accessory.
But she's got to still live in it. So like a 2-bedroom, 2-bath.
It can be a long-term rental in other parts of the structure as well. It's owner occupied or long-term rental. It's an accessory use. So also allow that, like, if you have an accessory apartment or something. That's
So we're going back to like Western where, you know, like all those houses on Forest Hills, half of it's rented for one set of college students and another half set for college students.
Are there other examples of like how you could use the property as an accessory use? Like could you long-term rent for 6 months and then short-term rent for the 6 months that tourism is good? Or could you live there for 4 months? Like what is the actual like cutoff for what's considered accessory?
So if you live there, you can have an accessory structure, the Airbnb. So, but the spirit of this thing is to encourage a community, encourage people to live here, and encourage the folks to come here and to live and to work here, not just come here, spend tourism dollars and leave. So that's what we're trying to address here. And I just wonder, you know, folks talk about how much is spent here by someone who comes as a tourist. Well, a permanent resident, a long-term renter that is here all year long, spends money in town all year long, becomes part of the community, goes to the churches, becomes someone that has roots in the community, raises a family in the community. And that's what we're really after. You know, the spirit of this thing is to encourage community.
At the same time, I have to go to Asheville or Waynesville, anywhere to go shopping. Restaurants, we have no new restaurants, we have no shopping, good shopping. We got Walmart.
Yeah, we're getting a little off topic. Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion to close the public hearing unless anyone else has.
That's money that is being spent elsewhere. I just have one more thing to add. The enforcement of it, please understand that this has become a witch hunt. So I know you're saying that the county is in charge of that, and that's probably another topic another time. But please be careful about us tattling on each other. Because it is why. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments? I'm going to close the public hearing again.
I just want to add, if you can do something about affordable housing, why take people's property rights away from them? And how many of you live in low density? Is that justified that you're even voting on this?
Well, it's in all of the areas. It's
And
not
low
just
density got cut out.
No, it's not. It's in all of them. That it's written right up there.
You're saying.
No, it's what she saw prior to tonight.
Oh, yes. Right. And that's, we talked about that. That's where that's
like, you can rent a room out of somebody's house. In today's time, who's gonna rent a room out of somebody's house?
Or a building if you have a second one.
And be right next to the owner. That, nobody's gonna rent those.
Yes, sir.
I think after listening to everyone and even what I said, it looks like you are trying to pay attention and come up with a formula so everybody can do essentially what they want to do. I think from everybody's standpoint, it's going to be an education process for, the realtors, when people are buying in this town, what you can and can't do, and that's going to be up to you guys and the county to educate us on what we can and can't do or how we're selling. So, I mean, we too have to make sure that we understand all of the requirements that are being laid down in the laws, but at the same time, for short term versus long term, I mean, short terms become a thing. People see they can make money. They go to other areas where they might can buy something a little less expensive, still take part in it. And I agree with him about saying that, someone that lives here year round, yeah, they're spending far more money than the sum of the tourism dollars. But, it's really an education process, I think. And, if we tell people that, they can't do short term, but you can think about doing long term, well, they may not buy because they can't make their money back based on, like he said, whether it's someone that's living here from an inheritance standpoint and they're trying to renovate that home that their mother couldn't afford to renovate. And then now, they don't want it for a long term. I mean, they got to make that money back. So thanks for listening to everybody. And I think, we all have to educate ourselves, but more often than not, we're going to have to, come up with a formula that works for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will say that our ordinances are on our town website. So every one of you, do we have the codification there yet? The new ones?
No, it should be soon, but the PDF of the ordinance,
The PDF is there, but, so you can look at that. And if I'm not mistaken, for the public hearing, this document was also there, the PDF, which tells you what we're talking about tonight, where it's in all of our zoning areas are open to some short-term rental.
No. It's, the previous one didn't include low density, general business, institutional or industrial. The new proposal still doesn't allow it in industrial and institutional.
Right.
Right. So it's not.
But it says right here in this, for the areas that it is, I apologize for saying it.
It's just industrial and institutional. But it's not.
Okay.
I know you want to close and it's just a statement. So I own a business in Dillsboro. I don't live over here, but, and so Jackson County, gets this big lump of, occupancy tax, which you guys would get in Silva from the Airbnbs. So once this, if you decide to go through with this, does Silva receive less of the occupancy tourism money than other parts of the county? I mean, long-term, should they get a big piece of the bucket if it should be going to other parts of the county? And you guys have eliminated that in your town?
That's not a formula prescribed by the legislature. You would need to reach out to maybe the TVA about that.
But I mean, we don't get it. Silva doesn't get any of the occupancy tax anyway. It's 4% occupancy tax. The TVA gets it all.
Okay. Not distributed and you guys don't get any of it per se?
I mean, if we apply for a grant from the TDA, I mean, the TDA does invest in like advertising for Silva. So I mean, we reap some benefit of it, but the entirety of the occupancy tax goes to the TDA, which is a county organization. The Tourism Development Authority. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Just real quick on that. So first of all, I want to commend what you said about the goal of like getting people to live here and be community members. I think that's a very noble goal. And I don't envy any of you for trying to find a balance in that situation. Just one thing that I thought about was, some restrictions on the Airbnb and tourism. For people have to come here for the first time to see how beautiful it is. And so there has to be that availability. And then one question that I heard that never got answered because everybody kept saying enforcement. This gentleman asked if there was any data or examples, like from the consultants that helped you rewrite the ordinance. I'm assuming that maybe they had done this and it's happened, something very similar has happened in another city, but like, I always like to refer to examples and I just didn't hear the answer to that question.
This is a really super fluid situation, and the 160D is meant to be a living document that we can look at whenever we need to look at something. So this is something that was brought to our attention about the low density. So this is how we're addressing it now. And I just want to say that I really appreciate everybody being here and voicing their opinions and taking part in this. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Well, so no examples or data from like, this is because it's so new that.
Well, we heard about Highlands.
Right.
You know, and we're seeing the effects all around us. So, you know, all we have to do is read the paper, you know, so.
Withers Ravenel was very clear that this is a very gray issue right now, and it is constantly changing. And legislature will probably come back with something when we don't know. And so this is a living document that could be altered.
And we're trying to do this in the best interest of Silva.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. In terms of the study, Mrs. Ravenel didn't present us any study, but I mean, if you go on Google, you can find a slew of studies about, I mean, there are plenty of studies on how Airbnb impacts housing. Very easy to find.
Well, I came for different reasons, so this is, I'm just listening and then.
But yes, there's a lot of studies that will show the impact of short-term rentals on housing.
And couldn't it be too, David, that, with what's going on with legislature and Airbnb being worldwide, that, these things are gonna come out, Supreme Court rulings, in fact, maybe.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that for sure, because it's just such a thing by all.
Would you state your name, please?
I'm sorry, Mary Ann Harr.
Yeah, these ordinances are going to change over time as we find out the impacts of these things, as things are studied, as these things are going to involve issues.
And they work their way through the courts.
Yeah, so I'll speak on that. The law is very unsettled on this. There are numerous cases in the pipeline that are on their way to the Court of Appeals, already at the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals decided one 6 or 7 months ago, and that was the case of Wilmington. And that one we hoped would shed some light on what they did, or at least the Court of Appeals was going to consider, on the enforceability of these, what's legal, what's not. And they kind of passed the buck and they sent it back. And so now both those parties have appealed that issue to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then has to decide if it's going to hear that. So we don't know. We've got Highlands that's been in this lawsuit for a year now. They were waiting to see, they just kind of put that lawsuit on hold so that they weren't spending money while they're waiting for the law to develop. And then when the Court of Appeals punted on it, now they're like, oh, now what do we do? So that's probably going to happen. There's most likely going to be legislative changes. Case law will be coming down. Going back on, not just on the affordable housing, but as far as the preservation of a real town, there's this difficult balance between keeping the town real, where families can live downtown and children can ride their bikes to the swimming pool and to Mark Watson Park and play basketball. And the real families still live here and not infringing upon people's property rights. So that's part of either the benefit or the pro or the con, however you want to look at it, of living within the municipality. We have zoning to protect for those things so that you hopefully can still raise your family here and have that still real town here for those of you that live here. The county doesn't have it. That there's plenty of money to be made in short-term rentals along the river, wherever. They're going up. There is still lots of economic opportunity here, based upon tourism and trout fishing and all the wonderful work and that both the tourism department has done, as well as just, where we live. So it's a really, laws unsettled. There's certainly great arguments on both sides. And so it kind of try to find that healthy balance of preserving our town the way we love it now without letting it be overrun by people that are not our own residents. So it's tough.
Okay, I would like to maybe have a motion to close. Now we've let everybody, does anybody else feel they have something they need to say? Then I will entertain the motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
All right, have a motion, any discussion? And those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you, and thank you all for being here, and we are trying our best to make this something that people can live with. And I just wanted to reiterate what our lawyer said, that the purpose of this ordinance is to preserve existing neighborhood, balance housing needs with tourism, and maintain the quality of life for residents in the town. So we're trying.
We are gonna vote on this, so. Oh, meeting's not over.
Yeah,
So that was just closing the public hearing. I'm sorry. We're back to new business. All right. The ordinance amendment. Like to comment. Then I know.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a change or discuss some proposed change in some of the words here. So going on to number 8, it reads short-term rentals in the LDR, MDR, HDR, PTB, GB, and PB districts are only allowed as an accessory use provided the primary use of the main structure is owner occupied or a long-term resident. I would like to change that last part of it. So after it says, so accessory use provided that the primary use of the property rather than who's living there. So the primary use of the property is a permanent residential dwelling, not short-term rental, with exception to districts that allow for mixed uses, for example, the downtown business district. So it applies more to the property rather than resident there. And if that's something that.
Say it again, primary use of the property is
Right.
a permanent.
So the primary use of the property is a permanent residential dwelling, not short-term rental. So so this is basically saying the same thing we are. It just removes the main structure is owner occupied or long-term rental. So so this covers someone who owns the property and lives there because it's a permanent residential dwelling, as well as a long-term renter. Again, it's permanent residential dwelling. So it takes away talking about who actually lives there, and it applies more to the property. But it says the same thing, but it removes the owner occupied and long-term renter. So because owner occupied could be a little bit, does it mean that the person who owns the property has to live there? So anyway, I just wanted to make that change, and I could submit that, to the boards, those words. So primary use of the property is a permanent residential dwelling, not STR, with exception to districts that allow for mixed uses. Example is the downtown business district.
The residential districts allow mixed use, don't they?
Yeah, that's just an example, but whatever the mixed uses are, it's just taking away the structure owner occupied or long term. So primary use of the property is a permanent residential dwelling. So that's the key. Use of the property is a permanent residential dwelling, because that's what we're on.
But a permanent residential dwelling doesn't have anything to do with the lease length, does it? Like, doesn't necessarily mean it's long-term lease?
it means that it's a residential dwelling, yeah, it's not a rental. I'm sorry, it's not a short-term rental.
Not all residential dwellings are mixed use.
No, not all are mixed use, I'm just using, there are some that are mixed use.
I see what you're saying, like
Yeah.
general business,
Right.
it's not.
Yes. Okay, you have, but if you're renting out an accessory part of that. If I read that in the ordinance, I would be incredibly confused about what was
Well,
going
why
on.
can't you just say it's long-term rental?
It's just the primary use of because you're not talking about, I mean, owner occupied as well, doesn't. So they both count under this. What problem are you trying to fix in this sentence? The problem is getting into like who can actually live there. I think that's where it gets a little dicey, where, owner occupied or long-term rental. There could be others. Those are the only two options that can. No, it wouldn't change the beginning part of this. It starts right here. It starts after. It's right down here at the end. What other option could there be besides an owner occupied or a long-term lease for a residential? It's either the owner living there or someone else living there. Right, but if you get into. If there's somebody else, so if you get into like, certain type, there are different other types of housing. So if it happened to be, owned by a company. What's that? Owned by a company? Yeah, but I mean, it could still be owned by a company, but it's got to be a person that's living, it's a residential, someone who's living there long term.
Why don't we just strike main structure and put property, but then put back in the words is owner occupied?
I think that the reason that the structure language is in there is because we want to allow it as an accessory use. But that's already there. I'm not striking that at all. Are allowed. So the short-term rentals is addressed in the first part. This is actually just replacing the last part, starting with the main structure is owner occupied. So the first part does not get changed. So short-term rentals are allowed as an accessory use, provided that the primary use of the property is a permanent residential home. And I'm fine to put that in and just have and have Eric review that a little bit too, but I wanted to introduce that.
But then we can't.
If you're in the downtown business district and you have a store on your downstairs and you wanted to Airbnb the upstairs, which I think is an acceptable thing to do. This would be very confusing for that person because the primary use is not residential. Whereas in this, the primary use just has to be owner occupied or long term. But then it's mixed because that allows for mixed use. That makes. Right, yeah, so mixed use, but only as an accessory use. I find that a lot more. Well, I'm just trying to take the idea is to take out the, it doesn't, but this says who can live there, owner occupied or a long-term rental, so renter. It kind of gets away from, it focuses more on the property rather than the folks.
That we can live on the property.
Yeah, I mean, because,
And say that again.
So the primary use of the property is a permanent residential dwelling, not short-term. Primary use, secondary use can be an accessory structure.
Y'all.
Wouldn't you say the primary use cannot be short-term rental?
I think we could look at several things there, what the underlying issue is, what the definition of mixed use is, and then look at the districts and see think about other primary uses and what that would change before we made a change like that.
Okay.
Now.
So can we, we've waited lots of time for this. So can we look at that change? We talk about that change and maybe have Eric look at it. Is that a necessary enough change to delay the passing? I guess we can change it later too. We could always change that. We can always amend it and then
maybe if it stays as it is and it gets questioned frequently, we can revisit it. You know, so.
Right. I think it's pretty clear. Yeah, I will. Okay, already done.
And I have a change from Mary on A. Let me hear from. this individual. You all have. Anything that needs to change? Well, this is Mary's. Yeah.
I think this is something we talked about during the work session. If we have agents who have properties under contract right now, who people who intend to make that a short-term rental, like how do we address that? I don't know if I really, well, we have an answer for that.
I was just making the suggestion of the 60 days to try to wrap up any pending things that are going on. And some of the things such as outdoor signage, or getting your recycle bins, getting your posted of your information, that's not going to happen tonight for those. So we do, in my opinion, need to extend that somewhat, whether it's 60 days or from July 28th or August 25th. I thought the board could decide that.
So it's kind of complicated, the changing the, how we define an existing short-term rental. If we extend that cutoff, then there's going to be I would expect a lot of people would try to collect some occupancy tax on their rental in the next month, so it'd be grandfathered in. And that's not the intent of this, of 8A. And but you're right, there's an issue if you haven't collected occupancy tax on it yet, but you have purchased it after, or started purchasing it before we passed the ordinance. But I mean, there's no way for that person to show that their honest intent was to invest in it as a short-term rental property. The only way to prove that is to have paid occupancy tax on it and to have paid that occupancy tax by now, I think. Right.
When our meeting was 2 weeks ago, so people have had 2 weeks to look into it.
Yeah, but if you already purchased your property and you're in the process of renovating it and to turn it into a short-term rental, there was no way for you to really collect occupancy tax, and if you spent $500,000 on it with that intention, I think that would that'd be rough.
The only, are there any houses in that boat? So it's been banned in low density since January. So if it's in low density, they are not part of this. The only thing we're talking about that even having the possibility for being in is in medium and high density. And we announced in January, we were going to be reviewing this ordinance and developing changes to it. So, I mean, the chances of someone being in that boat, I feel like are slim, and they do not have a vested interest yet. If they're still under contract, right?
I mean, even if they're closed, if they're working on renovations and have not, you know what I mean? Like, some of that stuff takes a little while. And I say this because I had someone from the community that has a house in Silva limits who is currently renovating with the intention to turn into a short-term Airbnb. And they did purchase this house before.
And after January, and they're not in low density.
I have to check on that. But
I mean, what's to stop everyone who's bought a house in that time frame from saying they were planning on having a short-term rental?
I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but I just know that could be something that comes up. And I know that was concerned with some agents if they sold the house and that person. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
So
I would be willing to support the 60 days from July 28th.
60 days of what?
July 20th, that was September 25th. You have to.
So anyone who wants to collect occupancy tax in the next 60 days will have a grandfathered in STR.
60 days from July 28th, so they have about 30 days.
So since decisions weren't made at that work session, that could just be an arbitrary date. I'm wondering, we think it might need to be from the amendment of this ordinance.
About 30 days from this week. Instead of going 60 days from July 28th, but 30 days from tonight.
Yeah.
To give everybody in Silva 30 days to collect occupancy tax and have a grandfather in this. Like, I think we should maybe place some more bounds on this. So say like, if you have closed on a house after the January deadline or the January date where we announced we would be discussing this, and today you have until, like, I don't know.
Why does it have to be related? I mean, occupancy tax is a great way to see it, but could there be a clause in there about if you closed with the intent of, or some kind of?
What's the intent? What's the intent of? I mean, this is a provable way to show that you have a vested interest in an STR. I can't think of another way to.
I just feel like the ordinance was not written, at least in my mind, the way that I thought we were putting it out there. And so it's a big surprise to me. So I imagine it's probably a big surprise to the agents when they saw that low density was not allowed. And they maybe made some pending sales on that. It wasn't given much publicity, in my opinion. For it.
I have 2 clients in that boat.
I mean, well, okay, it's a real estate agent's responsibility to be aware of the regulations in the area for which they're selling a house. This has been a regulation since January. If they're now closing and selling on a house in a low density district with the customer in a short-term rental, then the real estate agent has failed in their duty to provide the information that they require to apply to that person. I mean, this is a published ordinance. We've followed every bit of the timeline for the passing and announcement of this ordinance, the publishing of it. No one should be in the boat of closing on a low density district sale with the intent of getting it. It's not true with medium and high.
Yeah, what about medium?
What's the pleasure of the board?
I'm interested in extending it. I don't have a firm date, but I do feel like it should be a little bit longer than.
I'm not in favor of extending it. I think we're opening the door to everybody renting their places. We're gonna create more of a problem doing that. We're talking about potentially one person who maybe has expressed an interest in a short-term rental.
Yeah, is there a way, I guess, is there a way to do it? It probably isn't very many. Is there a way to do a case by case? I mean, is that possible? Is that nice? If it's.
Well, we've got, I mean, the paid occupancy tax is, that's a great
Yeah,
go back.
but if you were going to extend it, it's like, it's a compromise, but you extend it, but then if someone has to.
The only ones I think would have any standing would be somebody who recently purchased in either the medium or high density.
Right.
Because the low density, yeah, that's been law
Yeah.
since January.
Right.
So I guess if we did the 1 or 2 that could possibly apply to, then we can address that. If they absolutely bonafide sale, well, I guess, sue us, we can always settle a lawsuit.
So just to circle back to my example, it's in the medium density. They closed in that house last year. They are still renovating it with the intention of short-term rental. But I mean, it is a one-off, but I mean, we don't want, I don't know.
But that's not, I mean, but also they closed before the ordinance rewrite. So it's no different like the house I bought in 2014 and me saying, but I was planning on Airbnb it next year. So I should be exempt. I disagree. If you haven't collected your occupancy tax by the writing of this ordinance, then I don't like, I mean, anyone could say I was planning on Airbnb my house next year. I should be exempt, right? I mean, it's unfortunate for that person, but I mean, it's unfortunate for everyone who wants to Airbnb their house, and they can still do it as an accessory.
And they can still do it as a long-term rental. I know this gets lost in here, and it's not like this house is now empty and they have to sell it. They can definitely put someone who's dying to live here, like a college professor or whatever, the folks that want to move to Silva and can't because there's no housing. They can put a long-term renter in.
And I'm all for it, but being in property management, long-term and short-term are very different piece. So it's not as easy as saying like, I'm gonna do short-term or I'm gonna do long-term. It doesn't matter. It's very different game, so. I think if we can look at it. If there's any way that we can look at it in a case by case, I just don't know what that looks like for someone to be able to bring the evidence and like, hey, I was planning on making this a short-term rental. I mean, that's just from the real estate side of things. I think I'm trying to balance everything.
Eric, is there a way to tell from a closing statement? There's really nothing there that says, I'm gonna use this for.
No,
Well, the insurance that they got for it. That's one way to tell. Are you getting residential insurance? Are you getting rental insurance? Are you getting short-term?
I mean,
rental insurance?
a lot of Airbnb does your insurance for you. You don't have to change your homeowner insurance policy. I mean, again, it's like any ordinance. If you're planning on opening up a bar and you just were planning on opening it, and then the regulation changed and don't allow a bar in your neighborhood, we don't grandfather you in because you weren't a bar when we changed the ordinance, right? So I mean, it's dangerous to just exempt everyone who is planning on having an STR. We don't do that with any other ordinance change. If we change a use and disallow a use, we disallow that future use, not the current use. And if they don't have the current use of an STR,
I believe the current draft is defensible. I mean, so what I'm saying is we spent a lot of time working on this and David, put a lot of thought into it as well. This as drafted, it's defensible. If we want to revise it, that's certainly, if you all want to revise it, we certainly can. Depending on what's going to revise it to, I would maybe want to put some more thought into it as we start rewriting stuff.
Yes, and in that case, I want to call for a motion, either to change it or table it or something.
But one thing I did want to add on my little language change, could I ask that the town consult professional planning staff, not the planning board, but the planning staff on my language change, just to get their input.
the county enforcement you're talking about, whoever has to enforce it.
No. I was talking about my
You don't have
property. Or no,
You don't have planning
Eric.
staff.
So
yeah, Eric or John Generalowski
I
as
think
well.
that depends on what the motion is.
Okay.
Right? If the motion is to table it or consider amending, then yes. If the motion is to adopt it, then.
I'll make a motion we adopt it as presented tonight.
Okay.
Sorry, that was very lazy motion. I'll make a motion that we adopt the amended ordinance section 5.4 JJ as presented tonight.
We have a motion. Is there any other discussion?
I just want to say this is a little full breathable document, so.
Correct. And so we can still
Yeah, we can still, right.
county
Yep.
review or
Yep.
Eric review the
Yeah.
language.
So we're not going to do this.
This is amended.
You can make a motion to amend my motion if you want. But my motion is that.
Okay, we have a motion, hearing no further discussion. All those in favor of the motion to accept the document, as presented tonight, signify by raising your hand and say aye. Not anyone opposed? I didn't see. Right. This document, the motion carries and this will go into effect. Yeah, today, which is August 25th. Thank you all for being here and being with us on this kind of work, because it is something that we want to keep our town, a small town that we all love. Moving on to item number 2, special event request from Ward Plumbing and Heating, and also an alcohol request. Have that package.
Yes, so Ward Plumbing wants to have their
employee and family appreciation at Bridge Park, November the 18th. And they would like to have, alcohol served there. They want to, the event would be from 4 to 8, since the request includes the alcohol portion that has to come before the board. So they would rent for 8 hours, but including the setup.
And so, they will have someone who has an alcohol permit to be there to serve alcohol.
Yes.
Okay, do I have,
Can I motion?
yes,
Okay, I motion we approve.
okay, any discussions? Are we invited?
Yeah, it's Tuesday, but totally just customer appreciation.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, I will ask for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
And opposed? That is approved. Next, we have the resolutions for street events, street closures. And you have a list there. Paige, do you want to add anything to this? You also have the resolutions attached.
Yes, we've got resolutions with the times and the routes. This is the events that we're anticipating this year. This comes before the board so that we can submit it to DOT. By adopting it, it means that you're accepting the responsibility for safety, traffic flow, traffic control, and signage. So you've got 7 of them.
So is this like a votorama? We have to do each one, or can we just do them in one swoop?
You can do it either way.
Okay, I'd like to motion that we approve all 7 in one vote.
You state what they are. Since
Sure.
we're doing it in one.
Walk for Hope, October 1, Street, October 31st, WCU Homecoming, November 4, Veterans Day Parade, November 12, Christmas Parade, December 4, Bring Up the Mountains, April 22, 2023, Independence Day Celebration, July 4, 2023. Need a contingency date for Christmas Parade? Don't you usually approve that as a? No. Okay.
All right, we have a motion. Any discussion? Okay, then all those in favor of adopting these resolutions for street closure, signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Okay. None opposed. The motion carries for the resolutions. Next, we will go to our closed session. Thank you, everyone that was here. I would need a motion to go into closed session.
I will make the motion that we go into closed session, go to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11.
Thank you. If there's no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here.